So
I
was I.
was actually at a place called DC9, a music venue downtown, because my son was playing a gig there, and they they didn't have a TV at the bar, but they had one downstairs.
Mhm.
So I went down and watched it downstairs at that bar by myself. And I remember just when he scored the Euphoria, and you could actually
Oh,
hear
yeah.
the Euphoria not only in that bar, but the places around it. Flyers won, Penguins nothing last night. That's the hockey story. The Canadians won. The Golden Knights, Vegas came back and won in double overtime. So some drama in games. I mean, there's drama
Utah and
in
Vegas has been
other.
happening in the middle of the night, and it's been an incredible series. But like multiple
Uh,
games have gone to overtime, and this
yeah,
one double OT.
I saw. I flipped it back and forth. I was watching the Lakers Rockets game, and that game was headed towards overtime, and I turned it off. I was not going to stay up. That thing could have lasted
Yeah.
forever. I watched the end of the Rockets win over the Lakers. By the way, KD, didn't play last night, and he's not going to play in Game 6 back in Houston as the Rockets attempt to become the first team in NBA history to fall 3-0 down and come back and win a series. The Lakers really struggled from behind the arc. LeBron, in particular, could not get a shot to go down, had open looks from three, and I think he was 0 for 6, 0 for 7 from behind the arc. They did have, back in the lineup last night, Austin Reeves, who may have led him in scoring. He's a good player, man. Gets to the free throw line, so crafty. But the Rockets are finally playing some defense, which is really what they're known for. And they got the win last night to force a Game 6. The Pistons stayed alive as the 1 seed against Orlando, but Orlando was right there with them. And then I watched a lot of Raptors Cavs last night. God, man, I'm rooting for Toronto so much. I just can't stand watching James Harden play. Harden last night, ball dominant, another 6 turnovers. It happens all the time. They're just a better team. They've got better talent with Mobley and Allen and Donovan Mitchell, of course. Man, they were down 12 late third quarter, and it looked like Toronto had a chance to go into Cleveland and win a crucial Game 5, but the Cavs hold on in that one. And tonight, we get Knicks-Hawks back in Atlanta. See if the Hawks can force a 7th game. Game 6 back in Philly. See if the 76ers can force a 7th game. And the big game tonight for me, in terms of what I will be watching, is Denver at Minnesota, Game 6. Denver trying to come back from 3-1 down in the series. This would force a 7th and deciding game Saturday night in Denver. No Anthony Edwards. He's out for the next 2 weeks. He missed Game 5. He missed half of Game 4. No Dante DiVincenzo. The Timberwolves are hurting. The Nuggets, as the road team, are 6-point favorites tonight, 5.5 in spots. This is a big game. I've talked about this. I think this is a big game for Nikola Jokic. I really do, and the Nuggets in particular. You cannot lose to an Anthony Edwards-less Minnesota team. I don't care what the series status was when he left the series. You've got to come back and win the series, and for them to do that, they have to win on the road, and it's a very good environment in Minneapolis, a very good environment, super loud, and they play defense. I mean, Minnesota really gets after you defensively. I would say that Jaden McDaniels might be the best. I think he is the best defender, certainly one of the best defenders in the NBA, and he's given Jamal Murray a real problem, and Rudy Gobert's given Jokic a real problem. But you can't lose to the Minnesota Timberwolves if they don't have Anthony Edwards and they don't have Dante DiVincenzo. You can't. Big spot, because if Jokic goes out, that would be 3 straight years since they won the title without advancing past the second round. And then in this case, it would be a loss as the 3 seed to the 6 seed, and they'd be out in the first round. So if you're into, sports kind of storylines and legacy moments, I think this is one for one Nikola Jokic tonight. I think he's got to win tonight, win on Saturday, and get into a series against San Antonio. That would be their opponent in the next round. I actually think Denver matches up well with San Antonio, better with San Antonio in some ways than they do against Minnesota. But he's got to get there. If not, this is a sport judged on rings, always has been. He's got one. It'll keep him in the conversation of the greatest of all time. But if he doesn't get past the first round against this team, this will be a knock on his resume for sure. We got a busy show today, guest-wise. Coming up at 10:35, we talked about this on the show yesterday, that the World Cup's opener for the U.S. at SoFi against Paraguay is not sold out yet. And in fact, tickets in a lot of the venues are pricey, and they're having issues selling tickets for the World Cup, which starts in about 6 weeks. Adam Crafton, who covers soccer for The Athletic, is actually going to join us in about 25 minutes. We can talk about that. We can talk about the World Cup in general, sort of an intro to it. I'm looking forward to it. There's nothing else on other than the NBA Finals. Hopefully they'll be over by the time the soccer begins. But it's in our country. It's in Canada. It's in Mexico. It should be exciting. We'll get sort of a preview of that and find out why the tickets aren't solding with him. Jay Gruden will be on the show just to talk about the offseason and the draft. Mark Schlabach from ESPN will join us at about 11:35. To discuss the Live Tour's future. The Saudi group is backing out of the funding of that. Trying to get John Wall on the show, and I'll tell you why here momentarily. And then a little bit later on in the show, Jimbo Covert, Hall of Fame left tackle for the Chicago Bears during the 1980s, will be my guest. But let's get to it. What do you got? So John Wall, I've mentioned this many times. He's been on the show multiple times over the last few years. I really enjoy him as a guest. He is a basketball junkie. I mean, he is a true gym rat, as a player and as someone who follows the sport. And I think I've mentioned to you guys a few years ago, I'm like, he's so much better as, a personality now than he was as a player. And he's been on the NBA's, NBA network and doing a lot of analysis of the playoffs. Well, this morning it was announced that John Wall has become the president of basketball operations at Howard University. Good for him. I actually think this could be the first step. We'll see. President of basketball operations can be running a program. I'm curious to see how hands-on he will become. And I'm talking about not only in the recruiting and in the transfer portal and in the management of the program, but in the actual coaching of the team. Kenny Blackney's the coach there. He did a great job. Howard got to the tournament this year, won the MEAC. That's going to be interesting because in so many ways, I could picture John Wall being an excellent coach. But really good gig back in D.C., which is a place he loved and embraced, and this place is not, for whatever reason, it hasn't been a place that's been embraced by NBA players. Of course, he didn't choose Washington. Washington chose him, number one in the draft. But he loved it. He embraced it. And I know that they didn't get to the NBA Finals, and they didn't even get to the NBA's Eastern Conference Finals. But that stretch of several playoff seasons, several playoff series won. In fact, 9 years ago, just 2 nights ago, I think, was the 9-year anniversary of what I would consider to be one of the top 3 postseason games in Wizards/Bullets franchise history. when John Wall went off with 42 points in Game 6 to finish off the Hawks in the first round and advance to a second-round matchup against the Celtics in 2017. Of course, they lost that series to the Celtics in a seventh and deciding game. The seventh and deciding game forced by John Wall, who hit the buzzer beater in Game 6 and jumped up on the scorer's table and said, "My city." But that Game 6 to close out the Hawks, when he scored 17 of 19 points down the stretch for the team, had that incredible blocked shot. That was, to me, probably number 3, maybe number 2, the all-time, and, there isn't a lot to choose from. I understand that when it comes to Bullets Wizards playoff history. But the all-time performance for me, you got to go way back, and you got to be my age or older, or maybe a little bit younger, to remember what Elvin Hayes did in a Game 7 in 1979, the last time the Bullets/Wizards won more than 50 games in a season. And in the conference semifinals, they played a Game 7 at home against the Atlanta Hawks, coached by the way, Hubie Brown. And Elvin Hayes in that seventh and deciding game with President Jimmy Carter in attendance at what was an amped-up Capitol Center. That place was really good. It was really good for the Bullets when they were good in terms of a home court advantage. But he went for 39, I think it was 20 rebounds and 6 block shots. He dominated the game, dominated the fourth quarter. They won that seventh and deciding game. And then it was the next series that I would consider probably the second greatest game in franchise history in the postseason. Bobby Dandridge in the seventh and deciding game of the Eastern Conference Finals against San Antonio. They were in the Eastern Conference in 1979. The Bullets became, I think it was the third team in NBA history to come back from 3-1 to win a series, and it was in the Eastern Conference Finals. They were the defending champs, and Bobby Dandridge went for 37 in Game 7 and hit the game winner in overtime to beat the Spurs. They were led by George Gervin, Artis Gilmore. Actually, Artis Gilmore was not on that team. My fault. Larry Keenan and George Gervin and James Silas were the leaders for that San Antonio team. And there's a lot of controversy about that seventh and deciding game. The Bullets were down by 10 with about 4 minutes to go, and the power went out in the arena. There was a long delay, and Doug Moe, who was the coach of the Spurs, and even George Gervin himself, the Iceman, say that should have been a San Antonio potential world title. They would have become the first ABA team after the merger to win a title, and they felt robbed because once the power came back on, all of their momentum was lost. The Bullets got every call down the stretch, forced overtime, and won it in overtime, with Bobby D having just a phenomenal game. He was, those of you of a certain age know this. I can just tell you, in the annals of DC sports history, Bobby D is one of the all-time clutch performers for any of our teams, professional teams. Just an all-time clutch performer, and he was so big in that game. But John's game 9 years ago in Atlanta to close out the Hawks is certainly top 3 all-time playoff performance. Good for him. It'll be interesting to see what, Howard's done a great job here recently in basketball. They're one of only 5 mid-major programs out of 222 to make the NCAA tournament in 3 of the past 4 seasons. So they've done a really, really good job. They got that tournament win for the first time in school history in the 16 versus 16 game against UMBC. Good for John. Hope to get him on the show to be able to talk about that. But not only that, the NBA playoffs. We'll see if we can make that happen today or tomorrow. All right. When we come back, doesn't seem like many of you agree with me on Brandon Ayuk. More on that next. This from DKC. DKC writes, "This is no knock on you personally, but last summer I thought nothing could be possibly more annoying than every show on every station spending half of the airtime on Terry's contract. But I think the Ayuk talk is already neck and neck, and it's already April." Yeah, I've gotten a lot of this from many of you that you are already sick to your stomach with all of the Brandon Ayuk discussion. And with respect to that discussion, man, a lot of you completely disagree with me, which is fine. This from Wizard Sixth Man. My take on Ayuk, who, let me just repeat my take. If he's physically ready to go and from a medical standpoint, if he's psychologically, fit, and you can get him for no compensation in terms of draft picks and a heavily incentivized deal, which is what Nikki Javala and Matt Barrows from The Athletic reported is the only way Washington would do a deal, then I'm absolutely on board because there's literally no risk. You can cut him loose without any pain. That's how I would view it. I'm not up for spending real money on this guy in year one, and definitely not up for spending any, meaningful draft compensation. The problem with the draft compensation, as I've mentioned, is that if you trade for him, you inherit his contract. Nobody's going to do that. We've talked about that now for months. Nobody's inheriting that contract unless somehow you were able to work out a restructure beforehand or simultaneous with. I also, do have in my mind a feeling of, if they don't release him, anytime soon, there is a time where you move on and you look at others, whether it's a Diggs or whether it's a Keenan Allen or somebody else that's out there, Juwan Jennings, et cetera. Or you decide, hey, we're going to roll with what we have because it's somewhat comparable to what they had in 2024. But Wizard Sixth Man writes, this is such a lazy take by Kevin Sheehan, DC, who I love. This guy has talking about Ayuk, this guy has a 5 to 10% chance of returning to elite status ever. And then he writes in capital letters, EVER, ever. I'd say 55% chance he's done and to team cancer. 35% chance he's okay, not the same, but a contributor. Yeah, I don't know. I have zero ability to guess on what kind of player he could potentially be. You don't know anything about his physical or mental status. There is certainly a trail of bad judgment. There is no doubt about that. But a 5 to 10% chance of returning to elite status at 28 years old, that doesn't even sound in the realm of possibility or of knowing. From Skins Fan AZ, haha, I'd run from Ayuk. Why would Washington want to add a player that acted like that out of pocket? Need a vet, get Diggs. Hard pass on Ayuk. My 2 cents. Yes, back to the original email that I read from DKC about the situation has become annoying and, comparable to the Terry situation and the annoyance of talking about that all the time. I do agree, and I do feel a little bit of the, oh, God, another Brandon Ayuk report. Yesterday, it was the, Nikki Javala, Matt Barrows story where the team says, multiple sources with knowledge of the situation say the team is not going to trade compensation for him and would only do a highly incentivized short-term deal, which is the only way I'd be in favor of them doing it. And I think many of you as well, even if you aren't a big Brandon Ayuk fan. But I feel the, every other day or every day recently, certainly since the draft. But look, this is the guy that most people around the league believe is going to end up playing for Washington next year. And this isn't, just a waiver wire pickup of some aging vet. This is a guy who was, the last time he played a full season, in 2023 was an elite wide receiver. Elite. Finished as the second best receiver in the league per Pro Football Focus, for whatever that's worth. Averaged 18 yards per reception, and he was ascending. This is not really, in my opinion, comparable to the Terry discussion. They both can be annoying, but I don't think they're the same story. You know, the Terry story last summer was about a contract extension, and whether he got it or not, he was going to play because he was under contract. You know, it would have been insanity for Terry to hold out once the season began. That would have worked against him. So he was always going to play. He was under contract with the team. Ayuk is a total wild card whose presence could be, certainly no guarantee, but the reason you do this is that he could be an absolute game changer, a season changer, if he's the player or even remotely close to the player that he was in 2023. It could also turn out to be a dud. You know what it won't turn out to be if they handle it the right way? A disaster. Because if there's little risk in terms of contract, salary cap, giving up draft picks, and you can turn him loose if he becomes a problem, or if he just sucks and he's not any good, it can't be a disaster. I mean, what's he going to do in, a month or two? Is he really going to ruin a pretty solid locker room if he really is nuts? Is he going to ruin Jaden? There's a lot that could happen that would be negative, but once it becomes negative, they can turn away from him and say goodbye if they structure it the right way going in. I would view this as, if they do this deal that they've, reportedly would be interested in doing, is extremely low risk and extremely high reward potential. Totally different from Terry and the annoyance of talking about Terry every day last summer, in my opinion. That was something in which we were following the back and forth on a contract extension for a guy who was under contract heading into 2025 and was never going to sit. It did get painted and it did get presented by many. And some of you brought that to the air with me, that essentially you thought this was about Terry playing or not playing for the team. It was never about that. He was under contract for 2025. And it would have been personally devastating to his chances to ever getting a big payday had he held out of actual regular season games. So that was never going to happen. He was always going to play. It wasn't, Terry or no Terry. It was Terry under a new contract or Terry in the last year of his contract. Ayuk isn't with the team. He's a total wild card as to whether or not he'll be with us or not. There's a heavy lean towards him being with us, and the upside is very high in my view, because I believe that he was an elite receiver and ascending to, top 5 kind of territory over the next few years after 2023. He was that kind of a receiver. And I think if you get that, that's a major season-changing, event. Because now you've got him and Terry, but it could also not work out. But again, that's why you go in super low risk as a team, so that if it doesn't work out, see ya, and there's no pain. We're going to talk some World Cup and find out why a lot of venues across North America are having a difficult time selling tickets to some of the games. That's next. Yesterday, I read from a story in The Athletic written by Adam Crafton and Henry Bushnell about the struggle to sell tickets for World Cup games, specifically the U.S. opener at SoFi out in Los Angeles against Paraguay. I know that the price, and we talked about the prices of tickets. I talked about how I am headed towards a World Cup final on July 19th. My brother has an extra ticket, and I'm going, and I looked on StubHub, and literally tickets in the aftermarket for that World Cup final on July 19th are between $60,000 and $70,000. Never heard of anything like that. Not in the U.S. Not for a Super Bowl, not for a Final Four, not for a big fight, not for anything. I reached out to Adam Crafton, who wrote that story, and he is nice enough to join us right now. He is a reporter for The Athletic. He was the Sports Journalist of the Year in 2023. Covers soccer for The Athletic. You can follow Adam on X at Adam Crafton _. Adam, thanks for making time for me. I really appreciate it. So tell me why. Is it just pricing or is it something else as to why SoFi isn't sold out for the U.S.'s first World Cup game against Paraguay?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having me this morning. I think that there's a few factors at play. So the first thing to say is the leaked document that we obtained, which is essentially ticket sales for SoFi Stadium just outside Los Angeles, is dated around April the 10th. So obviously a little bit of time has passed now since then. But at that point, there was 40,934 tickets purchased for that game between the US and Paraguay, which had it less than the Iran game against New Zealand, which is around 50,000. Also less than games involving Belgium and Iran, Bosnia against, the team escapes me that Bosnia are playing against. So that gives a sense that this game isn't selling at the same pace. Now, if we look at the factors, I mean, pricing, as you've outlined, is absolutely a key factor. Category 1, Category 2 tickets priced at $2,730, $1,940.
And by the way, the categories are sections, right? It's the best seats are Category 1, medium level seats Category 2, the worst seats, the upper decks are like Category 3. That's how it works, correct?
That's it. And that's also a difference between how FIFA sell tickets compared to how the US traditionally sell tickets. Because normally you're able to go onto a seat map and you choose your specific seat within a venue. Whereas the way FIFA have done it is they do these broad categories. And that's also become another controversy because these categories appear to be evolving. Which means that some people who have bought seats in a certain category haven't necessarily ended up where they thought they would within the venue itself. Now, if we just look, though, at why this number is lower, now, one thing that the document didn't make clear was whether hospitality seating was included, which may take the number higher. But even then, I've also been told that the hospitality sales haven't been particularly strong, certainly for some of the games. So there has been an issue, but it's ultimately a question of pricing, I would say. I mean, if you were to look for other reasons, I think support for the US men's national team has not always translated into big attendances within the United States. That's largely due to the demographic makeup of the states, where many people who are passionate about soccer may also have roots in previous generations in different countries as well. You know, you see very, very strong diasporas, and it's often the case where if the US play Mexico or Colombia within the United States, often they'll be sort of out-supported within their own stadiums. But I struggle to believe that in the most popular state, in California, that if tickets weren't priced more reasonably, the US wouldn't have a sellout.
Just to be clear, SoFi for soccer, at least I think you wrote, is close to 70,000 capacity. So as of April 10th, 40,000 being sold, not counting the corporate, the hospitality sales potentially. They're like 30,000 short of a sellout for the first game, as of 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, there is also this member association allocation where a small percentage of tickets are made available to sell by the two associations who are involved in the game, as in the two teams associations. But clearly, it's significantly behind the other games, and that's even backed up. If you go onto the FIFA portal, it's one of the few games where there's been thousands of seats available pretty consistently. What we don't know is how many hospitality seats there are for that game. Have they gone really big on hospitality and not so much on ordinary tickets? However, it's also possible, FIFA just refused to clarify this, that document also included hospitality. So it could be, as you say, tens of thousands of tickets. It could also be a smaller number, but what is clear is that it is not selling at the pace of other games at that stadium, which on paper, at least, you would think would be kind of less attractive.
Adam, who are the biggest draws with this event in North America, Canada, the U.S., and then in Mexico? Which countries are absolutely killing it in ticket sales? Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, certainly Argentina, you have the Messi factor with that, but you also have a pretty strong Argentine diaspora, a very passionate Argentine soccer diaspora, and also a country that tends to travel despite exorbitant costs. They tend to sort of find a way. Brazil are selling well, as you would expect. Colombia selling very well. I think what you're finding is those countries that have big diasporas within the US, because you have to factor in, it's not just the expensive ticket prices, but what we're also seeing with this World Cup is flight prices rising due to, not in any small extent to the war in Iran, and flight prices going up as well to come into America.
Right.
But also hotel prices started very, very high when the draw was made. That's leveled off a little bit, but they're still very high around the games themselves. And also now we're seeing these huge transportation costs, even within the cities, to go to certain games as well. So you have to be kind of extremely wealthy to be a visitor into the US this summer to attend these games. So I think what you're then seeing is those with the biggest passionate soccer diasporas within the US are going to probably sell the best. And then it's a case of neutrals or people who are soccer curious, soccer excited, who want to see the best players. So I'm sure that Portugal games are in high demand, with Cristiano Ronaldo probably playing in his final World Cup. France, probably the best team in the world, although I'm told the French aren't travelling particularly strongly in terms of numbers. I'm sure there'll be a big demand for Americans and Mexicans, Canadians to see that team, probably England, Germany as well. But I think it's a blow to the tournament that you've not had Italy and Ireland qualify when you think of diasporas and what that would have brought to the tournament as well.
Yeah. Talking with Adam Crafton from The Athletic about the World Cup. And I was going to ask you about the countries that travel the best. I mean, we have that in the States, with teams in the NFL or in college football, fan bases that travel, really well. And Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, you mentioned, in terms of just the cost of entry, because you added to the cost the transportation costs. We heard that, getting to these stadiums from wherever you are staying is going to be a fortune as well in terms of transportation to get to the event when you're already there. Will this end up being the most costly for fans to get into a stadium to watch a World Cup of any World Cup or not?
Oh, like by
a lot.
I was going to say by a mile, probably by a million miles. It's unprecedented, the cost, completely unprecedented. It's, one of the, I get, to be a little bit blunt, it's kind of one of the greediest sports organizations meeting one of the greediest economies. And when those two things fuse together, it's creating a very, very expensive environment for guests and for visitors to the United States this summer. And I think what we're also seeing now is a battle within the host cities. So these host cities who bid for this tournament, you're now talking 8-9 years ago. At the time, they were promising huge economic impact, economic uplift, as you often see around these mega events. And that does not seem to be materializing in the way that they hoped. And a lot of these cities have committed big taxpayer dollars. You're talking tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. And what everyone is now starting to realize is the FIFA model, very similar to the IOC model with the Olympics, is FIFA come in and all of the revenue from ticketing, broadcast, sponsorship, even the car parking fees goes to FIFA. And, that 11 billion revenue, it goes to FIFA. It doesn't go to the host cities. And the host cities are kind of promised this huge economic impact. And there seems to be some cities now who are having doubts about that, whether they not only will make money, but whether they will lose money on this. And I think that explains some of what we've seen in the past few weeks around the public transportation costs, particularly in Boston and New Jersey, where local politicians are now saying, we can't afford this, and we can't afford to shift this cost onto our own taxpayers. And then you get into an ethical debate about, well, if you can't afford this thing, maybe you shouldn't have bid for it in the first place. And then it becomes a debate about, do you transfer that cost to visitors, to World Cup ticket holders, or to your own taxpayers, or find a fusion between the two? And I think that's one of the battles that's now playing out.
Yeah, this is really interesting because, like you said, in sort of the comparison to the IOC, there have been many Olympic cities that have regretted hosting the Olympics once they're long gone because the influx of incremental revenue just did not develop. We're talking to Adam Crafton. He covers soccer for The Athletic. As it relates to kind of the worldview of this game being in the United States primarily, but also in Canada, Toronto, Mexico City, because of the cost, is there a real negative feel around the world that the event's being hosted where it is?
I think it depends who you speak to. I think there's certainly in Europe, that there is a sense at the moment particularly in some of those countries that have been very upset by the US's approach to perhaps Ukraine or Greenland in recent times, who have felt antagonized in any case by the US and the current administration, that there is this sense of just a bit of fatigue around I guess many aspects of the US at the moment, and that is also coming in with the pricing. A lot of European soccer fans are accustomed to much cheaper pricing. The European Championships, the Euros, far cheaper, the pricing compared to what we're seeing with this World Cup. There's other parts of the world that just have travel bans whose fans would not be able to travel to this tournament, who will be relying on their diaspora. Haiti, Iran, Ivory Coast, Senegal, currently under travel bans. Others facing huge bond payments, up to $15,000 per person, to come into the country as well. So, and I think when you combine that with the overall climate about how sort of obtaining visas is at the moment in the States, I think there is this sense of some people just saying, I'm just not going to bother, and part of that is climate, but I think much more of it is the price. And the reality is that most people just can't afford it.
Yeah. How much of it is also just that this is the one country in the world where this isn't even close to number one?
As in soccer?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I think there is a bit of that as well. I think FIFA are very accustomed to going to places and people feeling very grateful that FIFA are there.
Right.
And that the World Cup is there, and that it's the most important thing that's ever happened to a country. I was in Qatar in 2022. Qatar, very controversially, built a ton of stadiums. They built a metro network basically just for FIFA. Yeah. And the US, a lot of the infrastructure, certainly from a stadium perspective, was already in place. There isn't this sense of, we're so grateful to have you, we're going to subsidize absolutely everything for you, we're going to make your life as easy as possible. some of the cities are now, they're looking towards the 2031 Women's World Cup, which is supposed to be in the United States, amongst other countries in North America. And a lot of the cities are, now pushing FIFA very, very hard to not have a repeat of what's happened this summer, in the sense of they want a far bigger revenue share, and they don't want to be subsidizing the event when FIFA is walking away with, I think FIFA's operating budget and prize money combined is around 3.6 billion, and they're talking about profits of 11 billion. So revenues of 11 billion. So that leaves a huge amount of money. Huge amount of money. What we're talking there, almost 7-8 billion that they can redistribute to their own network, whereas the cities are saying, well, we're losing money on this in some cases. So that is a battle that is going to play out during and after this competition.
Does the U.S. have any chance in the group that they are in to advance? Tell me about the U.S.'s chances.
Well, you'd hope so, because it's an expanded competition this time. So it's the biggest competition in terms of the number of teams competing. It was previously 32 teams, now it's 48. There's 12 groups of 4. And many of the groups will see 3 teams advance. You don't have to be, fortunately for the US, you don't have to be that good to actually get out of the group. US will play against Paraguay, Turkey, and Australia. I think they would expect to be able to beat Australia and Paraguay. Turkey, I think, will be their hardest game. But they've got a group of players that have kind of had big expectations put on them for a few years, kind of suggestion that they're a particularly gifted generation. They're yet to really show it, to be honest, as a team. But I would expect them to get out of the group. I'm not sure I'd expect them to progress much further, though, than the group stage based on what we've seen from the team over the last couple of years.
So let me just make sure I understand this. So now with 48, would the next round be 32? Are you just eliminating 16 teams in group stage?
So you'll have a new format, 48 teams.
Right.
And the top 2 from each of the 12 groups will advance automatically.
Well, wait a minute. If they're 40... Yeah, it's 40. So you got 12 groups in the top 2, so that's 24. And then you said that there were going to be several that had 3. So that's why I was guessing 32.
Yes, that's right. So the 8 best third place teams will advance.
Okay,
the 8. So the third.
So 32 is the beginning of the knockout round.
Exactly.
Okay. Real quickly before I let you run, I mean, I can look at the odds to, see the favorites, Spain, France, England, Brazil are all up there. From your standpoint, what would be the most exciting final on July 19th in the Meadowlands?
Ooh. I'm trying to think of the brackets and what would actually be possible. I can't think of that off the top of my head. But
okay.
I think the highest quality game would definitely include France. I think they're the best. I mean, the talent that they have is kind of off the scale. I guess the partial side of me thinks France and England. But I think France against Brazil, France against Argentina, obviously the holders, but they've had a very kind of disturbed preparation. So I'd be surprised to see them in the final stages. Portugal, incredibly talented. Kind of Cristiano Ronaldo aside, they've got an incredibly talented generation. So maybe France and Portugal would be the strongest. But we do tend to see with these tournaments that, when they're outside of Europe, European teams don't always do as well as you might think they will on paper as well. So if I had to guess, I'd go sort of something like France, Brazil.
Adam, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. Really enjoyed the information. Enjoy it when it starts. Maybe we'll reach out once it gets underway. Thanks.
Pleasure. Anytime. Take care.
Adam Crafton from The Athletic, everybody, on the World Cup. 48 teams. I didn't know that until he said it. 48 down to 32. So it's kind of hard not to advance to the knockout round. I mean, only 16 of the 48 won't. So the U.S., I would think, has a good chance to do that. I don't know if they have a good chance to do it. He seems to think they have a good chance to do it. Jay Gruden on Washington's offseason and draft next. Couple of you on Twitter asking me what he was talking about diasporas. That is basically, he explained it at the beginning. A diaspora is somebody who, it's basically a population within a country, but their origins are another country. And that's why he said, countries like Colombia and, Argentina and Brazil, they travel well, but they also have a lot of people who live here who, follow soccer from here, but will root for their country of origin. All right. Jay Gruden is with us, the former head coach of the Washington Redskins. We didn't talk before the draft. I want to get your thoughts on what they did and actually what you thought they should do heading in. But it has been a busy offseason for Adam Peters and company. And it started with free agency, and they added a lot of bodies, especially on defense, where you and I, the last time we talked, we both agreed that's where they have to add bodies. So let me just begin with, what do you think of this off season in its entirety?
I think it's been solid. I think they've addressed a lot of the needs. They got some experience. They've got some young guys to fill in. They've addressed some of their offensive needs as well. So, I think it's been a solid offseason. I think they are put in position as long as Jaden stays healthy to compete for the NFC East title, without a doubt.
Who do you like a lot versus who you don't like a lot? Not draft, just in terms of the players they added. I mean, defensively, Owe, Chenal, Chason, Nick Cross, Amik Robertson. They brought Tim Settle back. Offensively, they added Chigakonkwo from Tennessee. They brought Diami back. Van Jefferson, Rashad White. Are there any players that they've added here in the offseason that you really feel good about, and are there any that you're lukewarm on?
Well, I love the draft pick. Sonny Styles is a monster. This is a guy that can play all types of linebacker. He can play in nickel, cover receivers, tight ends, and running backs. He can play the A and B gaps with physicality. He's a guy that I expect to have over 150, 160 tackles when it's all said and done, and have that impact on defense right there in the middle is huge. And then Tim Settle coming back to add a little depth with Payne and Kinlaw is good. Owe, I'm not a huge fan of a guy that has limited sack production, really, but he's a solid player. He's been a solid player for some time there. I like Nick Cross. I like Amik Robertson, too, on defense. I think he's a little guy, but he plays his ass off, man. This guy's a good player. He can play nickel. He played a little bit outside at Detroit. I like him. I like Witherspoon for some depth over there corner, just in case Trey Amos doesn't get it done. I think Robert Witherspoon can do some good things. So defensively, I think they did good things. Offensively, I'm not a huge fan on the tight end they added. But he's a productive player at Tennessee. Rashad White, Jerome Ford, marginal back's pretty good. I just wish they had some more juice they added to the offensive side of the ball. They don't have any big home run hitters other than Terry. I think that's what they need to find. De'Ami Brown's a good add. Treylon Burks has been good for them last year, but, he's had an up and down career. Luke hasn't really done anything. I like Antonio Williams they added. He's more of a slot player, but I feel like they have Williams, Lane, and McCaffrey are kind of the same guy. They're inside players, and they're all punt returners. So one of those guys have to emerge as the number one guy. So they done some good things, but they need some more juice on offense, somebody that has some big play ability other than Jaden and Terry.
Well, there's a chance that could be coming in the form of Brandon Ayuk. What do you think about adding him?
I think that'd be big. I think that's just what they need. They need another guy. If they want to go two tight ends, that's to go opposite Terry. Right now, who is it? Is it Diami? Is it McCaffrey? Is it Burks? Is it I don't know who it is. I think they need that guy. I really do. I think that would be a much-needed addition to this offense.
What would concern you about Ayuk at this point? How would you approach it, or how would you recommend to let's just say if you guys were all back together, what would you recommend to Bruce about how to go about adding Brandon Ayuk?
I think the most important thing is health, and that's the trainer has to get with the coaching staff and make sure that this is a guy that can be healthy and play to the level that he's played at. If he's got an injury and it's not looking good, his upside's not there, then we wouldn't take a chance on him. But if he's cleared all the medical issues, then I think there's really no issues we have to deal with. He played with Jaden, for God's sakes. The GM had him in San Francisco. They should know him very well. So I would have a long talk with Jaden. Is this a guy that can help our football team? And have a long talk with the trainers. Is this guy healthy? And if so, then let's green light this on him. We're going to get him in here.
So it looks like the 49ers aren't in a rush to release him. They want to trade for him. I can't imagine. I would assume that you feel the same way, that no one's going to take on his current contract via a trade. They're going to wait for him to get released. You agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a no-brainer. And I think San Francisco will have to cut ties with them eventually. They're going to try to get what they can, maybe a third or fourth, but you're right, the contract's probably too high right now. Everybody knows that, and San Fran's kind of got their hands tied behind their back, and they're going to have to make a move.
They don't have to pay him, according to some of the reporting, anything until September 1. I mean, if they are really, at this point, upset about the way things went, not worried about what's best for him, not trying to help anybody else, they could conceivably wait until August 31st before releasing him. Would you have a cutoff date for acquiring him and getting him into your building? And if you pass that date, you got to look elsewhere.
I think it depends on what else is out there. Is there another player of his caliber that you might be able to add, which I'm not too sure.
Stephon Diggs is out there.
Yeah, somebody like that, then I think you'd have to really make a decision. Hey, should we go get Stephon Diggs and not have this problem? Wait and see what the San Fran's going to do. You got to try to add. I just think that's one of the most glaring needs they have on this team right now is another wide receiver that can make some plays opposite Terry. They have this slot guy that can help you with the addition of Antonio and obviously Luke and probably Jalen, but they need another outside guy, and whoever that is, they better address it quickly.
So there would be a date in which it would be too late after. Like, is that the beginning of training camp? When is it specifically for you?
I'd say beginning of training camp would be fine. I think this guy's an experienced player, and I think he can learn the system quickly. And as long as you get him in there training camp, just make sure he's healthy and can run and be that number 2 opposite Terry, then I think that would be a great addition. Right around training camp would be the ideal time, or the ideal cutoff time, I would say.
The Terry people hate when I say things like what I'm going to ask you and say to you, but if they got the Brandon Ayuk from the end of 2023, he'd be the number 1 receiver on this team, in my opinion. What do you say to that?
I'd say 1A, 1B. I think when you have 2 great receivers, I don't really think it matters. You look at some of the teams with 2 really good, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. We know Jamar is number 1, but T. Higgins makes enough plays where he's considered a number 1 as well. He gets paid like a number 1. So
right.
Having 2 great receivers is not an issue. Who cares who's 1 and 2? I think it's 1A and 1B, quite frankly, if you have Terry and Brandon, because both of them can hurt you in a lot of different ways.
If they did acquire Brandon Ayuk, let's say at the latest possible date, let's just say the 49ers just wanted to, wait as long as they could, and he got acquired via waivers, as a free agent on September 1st. When would he be able to be up to speed and play at a high level? How long would it take at that point in the
I don't think it take long at all. I think it's probably take him a week to 10 days, really.
Wow.
If this guy puts his effort into learning it, and formations and motions and all that stuff, which he's a smart guy. He played for a pretty good offensive coordinator in Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah.
He had no problems learning that, so I don't think he'd have a problem. And, with the new addition to David Blau's offense, I think they'll do a lot of under center stuff where I think it'd be pretty simple for a receiver to learn.
One of the receivers that's still out there as a free agent is one of your favorites. I mean, you have called him the best blocking wide receiver that you've ever seen. Apparently, he's just asked for too much money, Jawan Jennings. But would he be? Is he the juice that you'd be looking for, or just a really good starting, opposite receiver to Terry in the run game and elsewhere?
Yeah, I don't think he's as polished as a receiver as Brandon Ayuk. He's
Right.
more of a all-around guy that can really block and run after the catch and gives you some size advantage. And he's just a big, good football player. You know what I mean? He's done a lot of good things in his career. He brings a physicality to your offense that, it's kind of weird to say the receiver can do that, but he does that, man. And he'll help out Rashad White and obviously Bill Barrett and Jerome Ford and these guys in the running game. And he'll help out Jaden too with the tough catches between the numbers. So he'd be a good addition as well. But I think from a receiver standpoint, when you really want to run the route tree, I think Brandon Ayuk fits that bill a lot better.
Why aren't you a fan of Okonkwo, Chig?
I don't know. I don't know if he's a great blocker. He's not a great receiver. He's okay at everything. I don't know. He's just a guy to me. But he's better than the alternative, which is Bates, because Bates doesn't really run routes. Bates is a good blocker, and obviously Ben Simott's been a kind of a disappointment because he's had a lot of opportunities in training camps and practices, and for them to acquire a guy like Chig is concerning for me for Ben Simott's progress. So he's better than the alternative. It's just a tough position to find. There's really only a handful of really, really good tight ends that can do both in the blocking game and the receiving game. And I just think Chig's down the line a little bit, probably mid-pack, but he's a good ad.
Do you think it's concerning that Nick Allegretti right now is the number 1 center?
A little bit, and I think that's another concern I have. I think the interior part of the offensive line, I think they have good players. I think Laramie Tunsil's obviously a great player, but other than that, Connolly's got to get a lot better. That's for sure. He's got to play stronger. You got Cosme, you got Allegretti, you got Paul, you got the draft pick Gublin, you got Andrew Wiley. He's got some experience. Trent Scott's got some experience. How that line gels is going to be how that offense is going to tick. One more marquee player on offense, and then how the offensive line plays will be critical. They're all decent players, but moving Allegretti to center, let's see how he does. I'm sure he can do it, but jury's still out.
We continue with Jay Gruden. I didn't have a chance to talk to you before the draft. What were you hoping for heading into the first round for Washington at 7?
If Styles was there, I was hoping they'd get Styles, to be honest with you. I love the fact that Caleb Downs is a great player. I think he would have been a great addition as well. I think that probably was the discussions they had. Do we go Downs? Do we go Styles? But having a captain of your defense in the middle, there's not a lot of middle linebackers anymore that can do what Styles can do. Play in the passing game, run sideline to sideline, and play physical in the A and B gap. He's a guy that is a rare commodity, and to get him, he's going to be a captain of your defense. He's a captain at Ohio State. He's going to be the captain of your defense for the next 7, 8, 10 years. And losing Bobby Wagner, obviously, if they don't draft him, they probably would have had to re-sign Bobby Wagner. He's leaking oil. He's still a good player, had 150 tackles, but this guy's different. This guy's a hell of a lot faster. It can cover a lot more ground and still play physical.
If he had been picked earlier, who was number 2 for you?
Caleb Downs, yeah, for sure. He's the guy that can move all over the place. That piece on defense where you can play him in so many different locations has been very successful at Baltimore and obviously Seattle with the guys that they have. Having that player is very important on defense. That's who I would have gone with next.
Post-draft, is there a player and a fit with a team that you're really high on anywhere in the draft?
I think the draft was not that strong this year personally, and I didn't do as much work as I have in the past.
Right.
I played a lot more golf, studied all these draft players.
Yes, I know.
I wasn't really sold on the receiver from Ohio State that Tennessee took at 4. I think this is a late round player, but
a late first round player.
Going at 4 kind of, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Him going at 4 kind of tells you that the draft isn't that strong, quite frankly. But who knows? I mean, we'll see. I like the pass rusher of Texas Tech. The top 5, 6 guys are top 5 or 6 guys for a reason. I was surprised that the Rams picked Simpson at 13, but other than that, I think we'll wait and see. That's the way the draft always is. Everybody's high on the guys that they take, and then 3 or 4 years later, they're all gone. So we'll see how they do.
I mean, it's so true. I mean, I've talked so much about this, and I do it every year. We obsess so much as football fans over something in which the experts, people like you, get it wrong 2 out of 3 times. And the one that you...
Hey, maybe 1 out of...
Well, overall, other than you and your super keen evaluating talent eye, which, by the way, Scott McLuhan once said the best coach evaluating talent that I ever worked with was Jay Gruden. But for the most part, it's a, 40% is a really good hit rate when you look back on a draft 3 years after it happened. And like you said, sometimes the 4 out of 10 that hit, they hit with another team. It's not the team that drafted them.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I think what they did in free agency is kind of big. Adding what they added with, the defensive players that they added, I think it's a safe call. And hopefully some of these young guys, they didn't have a lot of draft picks anyway, so they had to address a lot of issues in free agency, which they did. So it'll be interesting to see how this team plays out. But I still think there's some weaknesses they have to address, and they really have to keep a close eye on the interior of the offensive line and the right tackle and make sure he's progressing.
So you were pricing out Sevenwoods more in terms of research than the draft over the last month, or whatever the club was. I did want to ask you, because I don't think we talked about him the last time we spoke, or at any time during the season. Do you like Mendoza?
Yeah, I like his upside. Obviously, he's a big kid that can really throw it. I'd be a little nervous if I had to start him year 1, game 1. I think he's a guy you'd want to have to be a backup for a year or 2, let him have time to really let this offense sink in, the protection plan, the footwork, all that stuff, the routes, the route trees, the route combinations, the audibles. That's a lot for a kid like that. A lot of times, these athletic quarterbacks come in with his own reads and the RPOs. It's really all he did at, not his own reads, but the RPOs. He did a ton of those at Indiana.
Yeah, right.
Like either hand off the inside zone, or if it's single guy out there, just throw the hitch. He did a lot of that. He's got a lot of work to do when it comes to mental progression, and I'd love to see him sit for a year or 2 behind Kirk and let Kirk play and let him develop. I think that's the way they should go. But if he has a great training camp and picks up the system and is winging it in practice, then he'll start.
All right. Out of the rest of Washington's picks, you already said Antonio Williams is an inside guy. But between the edge pass rusher, Tennessee, the running back from Penn State, Katron Allen, the center, the quarterback, was there anything that stood out about any of those players, good or bad?
No, I think they already got Katron Allen in the building with Rashad White and Merritt and Jerome Ford. I think he's that type of guy. I don't think he's really going to hurt you on third down. And he's more of a plotter between the tackles. Google in the center. He's going to come in and compete probably with Algrady, maybe. I don't know. The pass rusher had hardly any production. I tried to watch him on film and pull up his sacks. I couldn't find any. So I know he's got the length and he's got the get off that people like, but sack production is not there for me. So not overly excited about any of the other guys. We'll see how they do, though. But I am very excited about Sonny Styles. I'm excited about Antonio Williams. This guy can really run after the catch. He's got strong hands. He's a good player. So those two picks, I think, were very, very good. Other than that, the quarterback played in the Hula Bowl, I think, against me, and he didn't really jump off the off the field at
right.
me. He wasn't too exciting to me, but we'll see.
You liked a receiver. I think I saw you tweet out you liked one of the receivers that they signed as an undrafted free agent.
This guy, Chris Hilton, man, he didn't play much at LSU. And I don't know why. I don't know the whole story about him. I know I had him at practice every day, and I had him in the game and all that stuff. And this guy can run. I mean, he ran 4.4 at the combine. He's long. He can eat up ground in a hurry. He's got good hands. I think they're going to look at this guy in training. How the hell did this guy only have 12 or 13 catches at LSU? This guy is a good player. I might be missing something, but I think this guy is going to make the team. I really do.
All right, last question. You've told me many times before that when you got here, the guy that you had no idea was as good as he was Jordan Reed. But when you go back and think about all of the rookie mini camps you were involved in after drafts with drafted players, undrafted free agents, et cetera, and they've got their rookie mini camp coming up, I think, in a week and a half. Is there a player that during a rookie mini camp you remember more than any just sticking out and you're like, this guy is going to be on my roster?
Terry for sure. I know we picked him in the third round, but third round receivers, there's no guarantee that these guys are going to have an impact on your team right away. And right when he walked in the first couple routes he ran, we're like, this guy's going to be a stud. He's just so explosive off the line, and he was so smart and detailed. And we knew right away. That's why we kind of held him out in training camp and preseason games and unleashed him against Philadelphia. For sure, Terry was the one.
Yeah, you really did. You hit him that whole preseason because that opener against Philadelphia was a surprise. You were a big fan of Geis too, right?
Loved Darius. Loved him. I think he would have been one of the better backs in the National Football League. Just those two unfortunate knee injuries, which I would have never thought if he was going to get hurt, it would have been a shoulder because he ran so low to the ground and just plowed into everybody and so strong. I would never thought it'd be his knees because he was so strong. His lower body was so strong. Just shocking, just unfortunate. Terrible for him because he would have had a great NFL career.
Thanks for doing this. Hit him well today. I'll talk to you later.
You got it. Thanks.
Jay Gruden, everybody. When we come back, the power rankings, all too early NFL power rankings, are out post-draft. Where is Washington being talked about among the 32 teams? And guess who may be back at quarterback in the AFC North? More on that next. We're not ranking them, not yet. But a lot of the all too early NFL power rankings are out for the 2026 season now that the draft is in the rear view. CBS Sports has Washington at 26 among 32 teams. What's written about them is that they're coming off a down year, but Jaden Daniels is back, healthy, and they added some good pieces in free agency in the draft. There have been a lot of changes in the offseason, including their coordinators. 26, CBS Sports. NFL.com, 24. Fox, 23. Fox writes, Dan Quinn fell in love with Ohio State linebacker Sonny Styles, and that's great, but what this team needed most was offensive playmakers. They got Clemson wide receiver Antonio Williams in the third round, but they needed more, plus more help on the offensive line. Not a lot of love for Washington. By the way, I'll mention that in several of these rankings, they are the last power-ranked NFC East team. The Cowboys and Giants are getting some love, more love than Washington in some of these power rankings. I'm actually more interested because every year, that back half, these rankings are absurd anyway. Not because Washington's ranked low in all of them, but because the NFL is week to week, not even year to year. It changes so much. But I'm more interested in looking to see who's at the top of these, because I still think that at least going into next year, if everybody's healthy and based on what's happened in the offseason, I think the Rams are the best football team in the NFL on paper heading into the season. They are number one in a couple of these. They're also number 3, number 5 in a few of these. Seattle is back on top as the defending Super Bowl champion. Man, I still think that Seattle was a great football team, don't get me wrong, but that the Rams were right there. And in both of the games that really determined ultimately the Super Bowl winner. I mean, this season came down to 2 great football teams, Seattle and the Rams. You had 2 great football teams in 2025. And both of those teams faced off in 2 just memorable games at the end of the regular season on a Thursday night in Seattle, where the Seahawks rallied for a win that ultimately determined home field advantage. And then, of course, in the NFC Championship game, they were the 2 best teams. Philly was, falling apart. Chicago was too early to the party. The NFC South didn't have a real threat. They had, 3 losing record teams tied for first. It was about the Seahawks and the Rams, and I wouldn't even say anybody in the AFC, with one exception. I think the way that Houston was playing, that they were certainly a threat to win the whole thing, but they, completely, pooped their pants in the game in Foxborough. I still can't get over that game. What in God's name was DeMeco Ryans thinking? Take the ball out of your quarterback's hands, hand the ball off and punt 3-4 more times than you already did, and commit 3 or 4 less turnovers, and you win that game going away. If they coach that game differently. Washington not getting any love, and the odds aren't really favoring. Now, most odds have Washington as the 3rd pick in the NFC East, ahead of the Giants. But, I consider it to be a good position to be in. Low expectations from around the league. I have higher expectations. I think some of the low expectations really stem from this idea that's been perpetuated out there that they had a step-back season based on performance versus what it was based on, which was they didn't get a chance to see the performance from their best players because they were injured. That's why they were 5-12 more than anything else. Sometimes that gets lost when you look ahead to next year. You just look up the records when you're putting one of these lists together and you say, wow, yeah, that 24 season really was an aberration completely. They're not very good. The quarterback regressed, all that stuff. becomes part of the conversation, even though it is delusional based on fact. That's not what happened in 2025. What happened is their best players didn't get to play enough. And when they did play, they weren't playing with one another enough. We'll see. I mean, they're going to play the season regardless of where they are in the power rankings. And then how about this out of Cleveland? Mary Kay Cabot, longtime Browns beat reporter, columnist in Cleveland, has reported that Deshaun Watson is the leader in the clubhouse to be the starting quarterback in 2026. He's got the inside track. He's ahead of Shadur Sanders. He's ahead of Dylan Gabriel. They're the team, by the way, that selected Taylon Green, the 6'6" quarterback from Arkansas, who is just extremely athletic. But Todd Monken apparently wants to name the starter for 2026 before a lot of the offseason activities and definitely before training camp. Deshaun Watson, you know, if he has his life in order and cares about football again, maybe, certainly has the talent. Man, that game that he played against us in 2024, I can't remember a game in which a quarterback was less interested in performing. He looked like that was the last place he wanted to be. And, you know, that was that 2024 early season game where Washington blew out the Browns. But, God, he was terrible. That'd be pretty wild if Deshaun Watson made a comeback. It looks like the Live Tour is falling apart. Mark Schlabach from ESPN will join us next. Mark Schlabach from ESPN expected to join us here shortly. If you're not following the story, the Live Golf Tour / Golf League is losing its biggest funding partner, and that would be Saudi Arabia's public investment fund. They announced yesterday that they are pulling funding following this upcoming 2026 season. By the way, one of the Live Tour events is here next week at Trump National. The announcement of this included a mention that tournament next week, which starts Thursday at Trump National in Northern Virginia, will go on as planned. But this is the group that provided the opportunity for generational wealth for many players. I mean, John Rahm, signed a deal in which he got paid 90+ million to join the Live Tour. Dustin Johnson got 64 million. Bryson DeChambeau got 50-something million. Phil Mickelson reportedly signed for $200 million. We've got Mark? Okay, good. Mark is with us now. Mark Schlabach, who is covering this story and covers golf for ESPN. So I just mentioned that the Saudi Arabia Public Investment Fund is pulling its funding, and it has funded a lot over the last 3.5, 4 years. So does this, the simple conclusion would be Live ends after this year. Is that fair or not?
I would think those are the odds. I wouldn't put the death knell in it quite yet because there are enough rich guys out there who love golf to where they might make an investment, but it wouldn't be anywhere near what they were getting from the PIF, and the league wouldn't look anything like it looks like today. They could. Some people told me this morning they could consider a smaller number of tournaments, only in international events, because they're never going to get traction in the U.S. I'd call it the barely living tour right now.
The barely LIV tour. The PIF, by the way, just for everybody understands, so that everybody understands, is Saudi Arabia's public investment fund. So if it does end, obviously players are going to try to make their way back to the PGA Tour. Has that process already started based on this news?
There have been ongoing discussions ever since Brooks Koepka came back.
Right.
And paid a hefty price. And then Patrick Reed. But the PGA Tour obviously has all the leverage in the world. And look, not all these guys are going to want to come back. And the PGA Tour is not going to want everybody in Live. There are some guys that'll probably never come back who sued the PGA Tour in court. Matt Jones, Hudson Swafford, Bryson DeChambeau is one of those. But, he's one of the most popular golfers in the world. So how do you figure out the penalty? Bryson has talked about just going and playing in the majors and YouTube golf. But, I think it's going to be, they'll put them in categories, not set in stone, but there are guys that are former members. There's some guys who've never been PGA Tour members, some of the younger guys. There are guys that are never going to come back, like Phil Mickelson. So it'll be interesting. But I got the feeling it's going to hurt, and it's going to hurt a lot for them.
Mark, is it just a function of, at some point, no matter how much money this PIF, this public investment fund of Saudi Arabia has, that they just got sick of funding this thing to the tune of, I read in your story, $100 million a month, that it just got tiresome? I mean, where were the revenues for this thing that's even approached, something that justified the expense?
Yeah, I think it was costing them $40 million a tournament because they had a $30 million purse. And then, another $10 million to stage everything. But yeah, it's over I mean, the Saudis have endless money. The live people will tell you that the war in Iran didn't help because it cut off some of their oil exports. But at some point, no matter how much money you have, it's got to be a return on investment, and it's a sovereign wealth fund. I mean, it's the Saudi citizens' money, so there's got to be some fiscal responsibility to it. Yasser Al-Rumayyan, who's the PIF governor, who was the Live Golf CEO, who's stepping down today, he was the golf nut. He was the guy that wanted a seat on the PGA Tour Enterprises board. He wanted a membership at Augusta National and to stand under the oak tree outside the Augusta National Clubhouse. It was never going to happen. I mean, this was more of his hobby. It was an expensive damn hobby.
So I want to make sure I understand this. The players that got the ridiculous sums of money to jump to Live a few years back, the John Rahm, the 90-something million, the Phil, reportedly, 200 million or whatever it was, all of that's been paid. All of that was paid up front, correct?
I don't know the exact answer to that. I think some guys are still owed money. I know a few. I've been told a few of the contracts were guaranteed by the Saudi Arabian prince, so you got to think those are good. But we'll see if everybody gets paid or not.
Interesting.
But they have said they're going to fund. Yeah, they have said they're going to fund it through the end of this year. I wonder if Liv makes other adjustments, like canceling or postponing the event in New Orleans just to save some money. But I don't know. It's going to be. Look, there's only 5 or 6 guys in Liv Golf currently that would really move the needle for the PGA Tour. Bryson, John Rahm, Joaquin Neiman to a lesser extent.
Cam
Tyrrell
Smith.
Hatton's a really good player. I think Cam Smith and DJ are more worried about deep sea fishing than playing golf these days.
You mentioned Rahm.
It shows in their results. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. At this point, with Koepka back on tour and Patrick Reed making his way back, right? You said Rahm, DJ, but maybe not Cam Smith. Bryson's the one. Bryson and Rahm are the two that have to be back on the PGA Tour.
Yeah, but look, Rahm's a prideful guy, and he has refused to pay fines to the DP World Tour, which are far less than what he would probably have to pay the PGA Tour. Now, I think he's come to the conclusion after his performance at the Masters that, he can't prepare for majors properly playing at city parks in New Orleans and a municipal course in Bolingbroke, Illinois. So I could see him maybe going back to the DP World Tour. I think, I do think Brian Rolapp, the PGA Tour CEO who came from the NFL, he only worries about the bottom line. And if he feels that bringing back Bryson and Rahm is going to make his position better and make his product more valuable to television partners, he's going to do whatever it takes to get those guys back. But he's also going to have to deal with a locker room that he says admits has a ton of scar tissue. It's not going to be easy for these guys.
Mark, I'm a golf fan. I'm a sports fan. I can't tell you that I ever watched more than 5 minutes of a live, golf event. Wouldn't even be able to tell you where to find it on a weekend. I'm sure I could if I were interested. Ultimately, what did this thing do? What did it did it catch on with any sort of audience? Was it building? Was it declining? I mean, what's the legacy of the Live Tour going to be if this actually does come to an end at the end of this season?
I mean, ultimately, its legacy is going to be it made a bunch of rich guys richer and made their agents richer. And a lot of the agents were the ones pushing their guys to Live Golf. It did well. It does well in Australia. It does well in South Africa. It does okay in like Singapore and Hong Kong, places that are golf starved that don't have PGA Tour events anymore. But it's just the broadcasts weren't good. It was too much propaganda. The soccer announcer was Arlo White. Live I think I think it was maybe Joel Beal from Golf Digest or somebody said they tried to reinvent a 200-year-old sport with money, and their arrogance ended up undoing it in the end.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, when you mentioned there are a lot of rich guys that really like golf, I mean, the resurrection of this would take a lot of money. And if it's not sovereign money, if it's not foreign money, if it's not oil or gas or energy money, that's a big nut to keep that thing going, isn't it?
Yeah, no. And that's why I say it's not going to be anything close to its current form. You know, maybe they connect with the DP World Tour and, you know, to play these international events and national opens. And, you know, the team golf thing never really caught on. You know, don't burn your 4 aces and cleat shirts too quickly. But I just think the team golf stuff's never going to work.
Let's talk regular golf because we do have a PGA championship coming up right around the corner in the Philadelphia suburbs here 3 weeks after Rory won back-to-back Masters and Scheffler. That was some drama on the back nine. Last year at this time, I think a lot of us as fans thought, okay, he did it. He ended the drought and he's going to just start winning majors. You know, multiple, you know, he's got 6 or 7 left in him. And obviously he didn't the rest of last year, and he wasn't a favorite necessarily. He was close at Augusta this year, but he won. Is this the Masters that will unlock a big run for Rory?
Yeah, I think he would admit that he celebrated a little too much after winning the green jacket last year. There seemed to be a hangover with it, and then Scotty won too. You know, I think it clearly showed he no longer carries this never winning the Masters burden on his back. You know, Freddie Couples told his caddy during the first round, I think it was, you know, Rory might win this damn thing every year. Now, we'll see. You know, he's Shinnecock, doesn't suit his game, but I could maybe see him contending in the rest of them. But yeah, now we gotta wait and see if Scotty's gonna do the thing at U.S. Open.
Yeah, right, exactly. We're talking to Mark Schlabach. Let me just shift topics real quickly with you because I know you're not necessarily covering this story, but you cover college football. This Brendan Sorsby gambling story is a big one in the sport. I don't know how, Mark, this isn't going to continue to happen given the accessibility of gambling to all of these players. But this is the first big name. He was the number one portal guy out of Cincinnati, signed for, you know, I guess $5 million to be the quarterback at Texas Tech. Man, they can buy themselves a team down there, can't they? But do you think he ends up playing in 2026, or is it more of like a suspension maybe early in the year?
I'd be surprised if he suits up at all in 2026. You know, the fact he's going to treatment leads me to believe that they're going to, you know, argue that this is no different from alcoholism or drug addiction. We can't just throw this kid under the bus, but that seems to be the one rule the NCAA is bound and determined to enforce and make examples out of people with. And the fact that it wasn't just a one-off, that he'd been doing it for years and years and years, you know, since he was at Indiana, betting on his own team to win, but you can't bet on your own team.
Yeah.
You know, but, you know, I was asking somebody earlier in the week, the last time they heard about somebody being academically ineligible. It seems like the NCAA's lost the handle on that, but when it comes to gambling, I don't think they're going to go for any of it.
You lived around here for a while years ago. You follow and write about college sports, and the draft just happened. What did you think of Sonny Styles to Washington at 7?
He's a good player. I don't really follow the NFL closely, so I don't know exactly what the Commanders' needs were. I thought Caleb Downs was the best player on that defense, though. And for him to fall a little bit was surprising. But Styles, they were very well coached last year, and they had some serious talent on defense.
Yeah. Thanks for doing this. Always enjoy catching up and appreciate the information on Liv.
I'll be there next week at the Trump National.
It'll be a beautiful weekend. I'm sure. Hopefully. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Yep. Mark Schleba, everybody. That's interesting that those players haven't gotten. Maybe some of those players haven't gotten completely paid. Try to chase that money. But I guess if your deal is with the Prince, he's probably good for it. All right, when we come back, Jimbo Covert was a Hall of Fame left tackle during the 1980s on the great Chicago Bears teams, including the 1985 world champion Chicago Bears. He's involved in an event that he will talk about, but we also will talk about the games he played during the 80s against Washington and get his thoughts on Joe Jacoby not being in the Hall of Fame. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. Joining me right now is a Hall of Fame left tackle from the 1980s. Jimbo Covert played 8 years for the Chicago Bears, a member of the incredible 85 champion Bears. Jimbo's involved with Coast to Coast for ALS. It's a 4,000-mile ride raising awareness and funding for ALS research. You can go to coasttocoastforals.org and donate now to try to find a cure for this dreadful disease. Jimbo is with me, and we'll find out more details about this 4,000-mile ride, which, by the way, a very good friend of mine is on this ride as we speak. It's a great cause. But I want to start with this. You were a part of some incredible University of Pittsburgh teams. Dan Marino was the quarterback, and the offensive line at one point included you, Russ Grimm, and Mark May. I mean, did Marino ever get touched?
Well, not too much. And Kevin, he gets rid of the ball pretty quick, but I think
True.
it had a lot to do with giving him the opportunity to pick out a receiver and, let it fly. So he's a pretty special quarterback. It was great to have him, behind us. But, we had a great line coach in Joe Moore, who is, they have the award now, the Joe Moore Award, which is for the outstanding offensive line in college football, not just a particular player. So, I know Russ felt about Joe as well. So he was the guy that kind of set the tone and was such a great coach. And, I don't know how many guys he got to the NFL. I think something like 45 guys.
Crazy.
That he played for him, and at Temple, Notre Dame, and Pitt. So I mean, pretty incredible line coach.
Yeah, and those Pitt teams are really, I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but those are the greatest Pitt teams of probably in program history. A national championship team and a contender for a couple of years, and then. You came out in the 83 draft, which is still all time for the production of Hall of Famers. 7 Hall of Famers in the first round of that 83 draft, which was known as the quarterback draft with, Elway and Blackledge and Kelly, Eason, Ken O'Brien, and then finally your college teammate, Dan Marino. You went number 6 overall. An amazing class, and you join a team that's on the rise in the Bears. When did you have a sense that you guys were going to win a title with Ditka and Buddy Ryan and the group that you had? Did you know it from your rookie year? Because 84 was really that first step forward in terms of the playoffs and a playoff win.
Yeah, you're right about that, Kevin. I think 83, no. I mean, when I first got there, we weren't very good at the beginning of the year. I mean, we were still trying to find our way. It was McMahon's real first full-time year as a starter. I mean, he started his rookie, but that was the strike year.
Yeah.
82.
82
so
was,
it was kind of abbreviated, and so he didn't get a full season in. And so we were just trying to find our way, and I think we lost our first 5 out of 7 games or something like that, something crazy. But then we kind of started to find ourselves a little bit, and I think we won 6 out of our last 8. I can't remember exactly what it was, but we finished 8-8 that year, which was, believe me, was a miracle for that team as the way we started. And then, as you said, the next year, I think we started to find our footing, and you can see the difference. And even though McMahon was hurt halfway through the year, we managed to put it together with a bunch of different quarterbacks and still got to the NFC Championship game. And although we lost, I think that really set the tone for the next year.
Yeah, you could really see it coming as an NFL fan, the 84 Bears. It was a team that really started to play well. And we here in Washington actually saw it up close and personal, because the first playoff win for those 80s Bears was at RFK Stadium following the 84 season in the divisional round, before you guys went on the following week and lost against the 49ers at Candlestick in the NFC Championship game. But I wanted to get your memories of that game, because the Skins were, a dominant team there for a few years. They won the Super Bowl in 82. They were the NFC champs and the Super Bowl runner-ups in 83. and they were the NFC East champs again in 84, and they were a big favorite that day at RFK. They were supposed to win that game, and I just remember Joe Theismann, I think he got sacked 7 or 8 times in that game, but it was a close game. Take me back to that day. What are your memories of the Bears' first playoff win of that era? It was at RFK.
Well, I think we were ready. I mean, we went down there ready, and I think the Skins might have just maybe underestimated us a bit, especially on offense. And even though Steve Fuller was there as our backup, who was a real quality player as well, we put together some good drives. Yeah, but our defense put us in such great position for most of the day, and we paid off for us. And I think you could see that in some of the drives we put together, and some big plays too, as well on offense. But our defense played so great that day, and I think that's really what. And going into RFK back in those days wasn't easy, and in the regular season, but then especially in the playoffs, it wasn't easy. And it was a good win for us.
Yeah, it was. And that 84 experience included in that, winning at RFK in the postseason against the Redskins, set the stage for what came next. And what came next? The 85 Chicago Bears. For my money, Jimbo, in my lifetime of watching NFL football, that's the single most dominant season by a team that I've ever seen. You've been told that, I'm sure, tens of thousands of times. And I'll be another one to ask you about those 85 Bears, which just had, I think, the greatest defense in the history of the game. Certainly, it's a top 2 or 3 defense of all time. In my lifetime, I think it's the best I've ever seen. So just take me back to 85 and just give me your memories, because I'm sure you never get asked to do this, about those 85 Bears.
Well, I mean, you're exactly right. Excuse me. Our defense was very dominant, and I just remember watching it from the sidelines, and it was pretty amazing, seeing what those guys were able to accomplish. But I think what people really forget about that, Kevin, is that, we led the league in rushing, we led the league in time possession, we were second in the league in scoring, we led the league in first downs. That makes your defense pretty good. And people don't really remember that when they talk about the 85 Bears. You always want to talk about the defense, which they should, right? Because they were so great. But they played on, a lot of times they played on a short field. A lot of times they didn't play because we always led the league in time possession, and we led in most games in time possession. So when you get that kind of combination of a great running game and you can still score some points and you let your defense go, that's very complimentary. And I think that's what that team was, very complimentary of each other, and it showed up most of the year.
Does it bother you guys on the offensive side of the ball that the first thing NFL fans think of when they think of the 85 Bears is that defense?
I don't think it bothers us because they were so great, and you're right. But people don't think about, just look at the stats. Right?
Yeah.
If you look at the stats don't lie. So if you lead the league in rushing, right, you lead the league in time possession, you're second in the league in scoring, second in the league. Scoring, not in the conference. You lead the league in first downs. I mean, think about what that does for a defense. But nobody really thinks about that because the defense is so dominant, and that's fine. I mean, it is what it is. But Chicago has always been known for defense, right? They had a middle linebacker, you had Dick Buckus, you had Mike Singletary, you had Bill George. It's always been known as a defensive town. So you really weren't going to get that kind of recognition. But, at the end of the day, we won a Super Bowl, and that's all that counts.
I mean, there was that one night, in the Orange Bowl against Miami, perfect record on the line, and your former college teammate lit up that defense, which is still kind of a remarkable thing after watching you guys that entire year that happened. Give me 30 to 60 seconds on that night in Miami late in December of 85.
Well, we were practicing in Atlanta then because our field behind Hallis Hall is just a quagmire of mud. So they sent us down to Atlanta, and we were kind of practicing afternoons and mornings with the Falcons in that facility down there. And I remember Buddy Ryan coming up behind me, and he said, "We're going to blitz your pal, your buddy, and knock him on his butt." And I said, "You do that, he's going to kill you. He's going to kill you," because I've seen it. And, Buddy actually, if you go talk to a lot of defensive guys, Buddy refused to play nickel. He wouldn't play 5 defensive backs.
Right.
He's the best quarterback in the league. Plus, you had, 4 or 5 guys. I mean, you had Duper, you had Clayton, you had Matt Moore. They all could get open on anybody. And when you put that combination together and you're only playing 4 defensive backs and you think you're going to get to the quarterback, and that was our kind of our recipe all year, right? Get to the quarterback. You're not going to do that. And then they had the moving pocket a little bit. They got him out of the pocket and they had a great game plan. They had a super great game plan. But when I look at that game, I say it's the best thing that ever happened to us, because we went down there. We thought we were going to kick the hell out of Miami. We really did. And when we got beat, it was like, okay, this isn't going to be easy. I mean, we're going to have to work at this. People aren't going to give this thing to you. You're going to have to play some football. And that's what happened. And I think that really helped us later on in the year to refocus. And we ran the table after that.
Yeah, and none of those playoff games were close against the Giants, Rams, and then in the against the Patriots in the Super Bowl. I kind of consider that decade to be, one of the best ever in the history of the league, especially for the NFC teams. And the Skins had kind of these mini rivalries with teams outside their division. The NFC East was loaded, obviously, but they played the 49ers multiple times in the postseason over the Gibbs era. And, we talked about the first playoff game. There were 2 more playoff games and several big-time regular season games. It seemed like every year the Skins and the Bears were, a highlighted game on the NFL schedule. But 2 times at Soldier Field, Washington went in there and beat the Bears. The first year in '86, Flutie was the quarterback. McMahon had gotten hurt. And then the next year was a game, Jimbo, that includes probably a top 5 play in Skins franchise history. Darrell Green's punt return, at frigid Soldier Field to give the Skins the lead and win that game. But what do you remember about the games against the Redskins in the 80s?
Well, I think, that 86 team was a good football team. It's just our quarterback got hurt.
Exactly.
That really hurt.
Yeah.
I mean, and so, Doug Flutie was not ready to play that game, in my opinion. And, I think Mike thought he could get out of the pocket and make some things happen, but he didn't really even understand our offense. So I don't blame him for that. I don't think he really understood our offense that well. And Washington was a good defense. They're a really good defense. So we just couldn't run the ball. I mean, we had to throw the ball. And so that really changed a lot of stuff. But you got to remember that year we played with a bunch of different quarterbacks after McMahon got hurt, and we were 14-2.
Yeah. I
mean, we were a 50-yard field goal away when the Rams beat us on Monday night from being 15-1 2 years in a row. No one's ever done that. And we did it with like 4 or 5 different quarterbacks. So that was a heartbreaker for us, because we really had a chance. If Jim would have stayed healthy, I think we could have won 2 Super Bowls in a row because of that. And then that 87 game, I mean, that game was a close game until Darrell kind of ran that punt back, and that was a heartbreaker for us. But it was still pretty close to the end, and then we ended up getting beat. We fumbled the ball down towards the end zone, and that was tough. But those were great games against. I had played against Dexter Manley. I had to make sure I was playing well, and he's a great player. And for me, they were always a challenge. Right, that defensive line was really good, and so we had to make sure our offensive line was playing well.
So, your name's come up in a lot of conversations over the last couple of years, and I'll tell you why. Joe Jacoby, who is near and dear to everybody's hearts in DC. He's a 3-time world champion. He was an all 80s tackle. You were as well. You're in the Hall of Fame. Jake was certainly one of the best, along with you and a few others during that time. He's not in the Hall of Fame, and I think a lot of us believe that he deserves it as much as Russ Grimm deserved to get in. From maybe the most famous in terms of titles or labels, offensive lines in NFL history, the 80s and 90s Skins Hogs. What do you think about Jake's candidacy for the Hall of Fame and the fact that he hasn't gotten in yet?
Well, I mean, he definitely deserves to be in. He was a great player. So, just the whole process and the whole deal to get in the Hall of Fame is extremely difficult. And I waited for a long time as well, and it was in my second year as a senior is when I got in,
Right.
and I just think it was fortuitous because I think the year before I was one of the senior candidates and I didn't make it, but I was in the room, right? And
Yeah.
so they were discussing me, and then the next year was a centennial class. So I think for me, it was just happened to be at the right place at the right time, and so and Joe played a couple more years than I did, so he was still a modern era candidate then. And that kind of hurt him, right? And but if you go back and look at the 80s, you had Joe, you had Gary Zimmerman, Lomas Brown, Mike Ken, Jackie Slater. I mean, all those guys made the Pro Bowl at one time or another in the 80s.
Yeah.
I mean, go back and think about those guys, right? So at one time or another, one of those guys made the Pro Bowl. So you take votes away from each other, right? And there's only going to be three guys. And then if you look at the AFC, it was more Anthony Munoz and
Sure.
who, right?
Yeah, no,
I mean,
exactly.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong about that. I mean, I'm sure there were some other guys.
No, Munoz
no
was
big
an
name
absolute
other
guy.
guy.
Yeah, Munoz was the
Right.
absolute lock from that decade in
Right.
terms of the tackles, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But I'm saying as far as
No
other,
depth like
other-
the NFC had.
right.
Yes, correct.
Right, the NFC had. So what happens is, there's just a lot of names there, right? And if you think about that, Gary's in the Hall of Fame, Jackie's in the Hall of Fame. Does Mike Ken deserve to be in the Hall of Fame? Yes, I think so. And I think Lomas Brown does as well. So you start thinking about that, and it's just a huge competition. And like I said, I was just extremely fortunate and thankful that it just happened the way it did. If it happens a different way, maybe I'm not in the Hall of Fame. So, I mean, that's how difficult it is to get in. But does Joey Jacoby deserve to be in the Hall of Fame? Absolutely. It's just hopefully his time will come when it happens, like I said, when, circumstances are in his favor. And that's kind of what happened with me.
So let's get into the present. What do you think of Caleb Williams and the current team in Chicago?
Well, we finally got a quarterback and a guy that can help us go to the next level. This kid's special. I mean, when you look at him and just the difference that he's made over a year and just his maturity, I think has been incredible. But I also think what happened is the year before, I think he gave up like 68 sacks or some god-awful number or something like that. And I remember in 16 games, one time we gave up like 24 sacks. I mean, just think of the difference of that, right? And so 17 games give up that many sacks, but they built that offensive line around him, and so you had a couple good Pro Bowl, All Pro caliber players around him, and you could see the difference. So they cut those sacks down in more than half, and he got some maturity, and they got some kids for him to throw to, and now the next thing you know, that's a recipe for him being successful. And then you get Ben Johnson as an offensive coach. And so I think all of those things got him to where he is in only his second year. You're going to see some incredible things from this kid. And I think he throws better on the run than he does in the pocket.
Yeah.
And his accuracy is incredible. So I think you're going to see this player, this Caleb Williams, this kid. He's gonna be a special player for a long time.
Yeah, it's a brutal division, but man, some of those games last year, some of the plays in which basically he went backwards 30 yards and then threw 60 yards were thrilling, including the game-tying touchdown in the playoff game against the Rams. Real quickly before we get to why you're here, give me the player, the tackle in the game today that you really enjoy watching.
That's a really good question. There's so many really good players out there. I think an old school guy that I don't know if he's going to come back or what the story with him is. I think Lane Johnson's a really good player.
Yeah.
I think he's played for a long time. He's a really good pass protector, blocks for the run really well. So he's a really good player. I think the kid from Detroit, I can't remember his
Sewell,
name right
yeah.
off. Yeah, he's a really good player as well. I think Darnell Wright, this right tackle for the Bears, is going to be a great player too. I mean, he's still, a young kid. He's only his, I think, third year, and he's shown some really good potential. So there's a lot of good players. I mean, there's some tough guys in the league. There's a lot of good players out there. Playing left tackle is not the easiest position in the world to play either, so that's a difficult thing. And so playing left tackle in the league, I think, especially now with a lot of these edge guys, when Joe and I were in the league, you played against a guy that played, 60, 70 snaps. Every once in a while they bring in a pass rusher, but you played against a guy all the time. Now you get a guy, you specialists coming in playing 20 snaps, and they're fresh, and you're on turf, and these kids can run 4 or 5s, and you're going backwards, right? Playing offensive line, especially tackle in this league, is not an easy proposition. So they have to be great athletes, and that's what you're seeing today.
With Jake's name being brought up by me and then you again there, I think about another left tackle that played for this team, and actually Jake ended up moving to right tackle there for a little bit. But Jim Lachey may have been the most talented lineman to play for our franchise and one of the most talented in the game back then. Do you agree?
He had great feet. Yeah, really good feet. I think, I got hurt that year in '88 and went back and had back surgery and missed the first half of the season, and then came back and played like the last 8 games, and we made it to the NFC Championship game, got beat by
San Francisco.
Yeah. But they were looking, the Bears were thinking about trying to trade for him because, what such a great player he was, but it was very difficult. Maybe they didn't have the capital or draft capital or whatever they were looking for, but he ended up there. And, I think that's another bad rap that, maybe Jake gets because they think, well, maybe if he should have maybe stayed at left, and since he got pushed to right, it was because, that Lachey was a better player. I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
I just think you're trying to put the best 5 guys out there, right?
Yeah.
And so you got to find a place for there. Just traded for the guy, right? So
they traded a quarterback. Jay Schrader was dealt for Jim Lachey straight up.
Yeah. So I think that's a bad rap that Jake unfairly gets.
All right.
He should not get that because, one of the premier left tackles of the '80s. He shouldn't get that rap, and I think that was unfair. It's an unfair comparison.
So tell us about Coast to Coast for ALS.
Well, I've been on the Packard board at Johns Hopkins. It's the Packard board for ALS research at Johns Hopkins. I've been on there for quite some time, almost 7 or 8 years now, because I'm so interested. It was way before Steve McMichael got diagnosed with ALS. It was just, I just kind of feel like there's a real correlation, a real connection between concussions and ALS and Parkinson's and other neurological diseases. And that's just my opinion. And I think, some of the things that you see maybe a little bit more anecdotally, but I think, you're going to see some of that, science that might come out there is, especially in football players and combat veterans that see that. And so it just really interested me. So they got me involved in that and then, just trying to help them raise awareness and therapies and trying to find a cure for this dreadful disease, right? ALS. So, I got involved with them, and then, this whole coast to coast thing is really kind of cool. You talk about going a 4,000-mile bike ride, starting on the West Coast and finishing up in the East Coast, and they're trying to get me on a bike in Chicago. I don't know if that's going to happen. I haven't been on a bike since I was riding my Schwinn Continental up and down the hills in Pittsburgh, trying to get ready for camp.
Right.
And so we'll see. But it's such a great cause, and they're going to have the ability to raise more awareness for ALS, raise money for ALS, and hopefully one day Kevin find a cure for this disease, and hopefully that's where this thing is going.
Coast to Coast for the number 4 ALS.org. There's a big donate now button in the right upper corner. Yeah, it's a dreadful disease, and a lot of people making a long journey coast to coast to raise awareness and raise money for it. Jimbo, thank you so much. Really enjoyed it and appreciated it.
Yep, Kevin, you bet.
Jimbo Covert, everybody. Yeah, we've talked about him, in context of Jacoby's Hall of Fame case. Jimbo Covert's in the Hall of Fame, and he played 59 fewer games than Jake over a career that was 5 years shorter than Jake's. Jake had 4 Pro Bowls, 2 first-team All-Pro teams. Covert had 2 Pro Bowls and 2 first-team All-Pro teams. He was an excellent left tackle during that era in which there were a lot of really good tackles, and they were all in the NFC for some reason, except for Anthony Munoz and Gary Zimmerman, who ultimately was in Denver. But Jake's case is as strong as Jimbo Covert's, something that we've talked about for a while now. All right, there is news related to Austin Eckler. We'll have that for you when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, theteam980.com. We're also free and live on the Odyssey app. Don't forget, you can watch this show on the Team 980's YouTube channel. Just hit the subscribe button and hit the like button when you get there. This from Skins 28 Forever. He writes, Sheehan, the reason the burgundy and gold are at the bottom of the power rankings, Adam Peters has failed JD5 over the last few months. No Pierce, as in Alec Pierce. No Dobbs, as in Romeo Dobbs. Couldn't get Love, as in Jeremiah Love. It's going to be another season where Jaden has to play Superman, and I thought they weren't doing that anymore. No center, weak wide receiver and running back groups, and a shorter tight end option compared to Ertz. That's why they're at the bottom. Yeah, I would say that that's probably part of why the all too early NFL power rankings primarily have Washington in the bottom third of the league. Close to the bottom quarter of the league, actually. But that's probably the reason. I actually think the reason is there's this feeling, and it happens every year, where when you look back on a previous season and you're charged with writing, a column where you're doing something like power rankings, which for everybody is a bit of a throwaway, even though we do it on a weekly basis during the football season. And I think they just look at records and they just think that the team, they really took a step back. That's not really what happened, as we all know. They took their record was what it was because their best players didn't play a lot of football. Now, in terms of Adam Peters failing Jaden Daniels with additions to the offense, they tried to get Pierce, they tried to get Dobbs, to your point. There are some reports out there that Jeremiah Love was certainly somebody they would have taken had he made it to 7, but he didn't. The no center thing. Let me just mention something about Nick Allegretti. I have heard over the last couple of days that inside that building, the coaches and even his teammates are higher on his prospect of being the starting center than maybe most fans or pundits around the league are. I don't think they fear Nick Allegretti playing center. I think that was maybe not plan A. Tyler Linderbaum may have been plan A. And maybe plan B was to take somebody like the kid from Alabama in the draft. He went one pick before Joseph's, the edge from Tennessee. Maybe if he were on the clock, they would have taken him. But I have heard that it's not as dire in the building in the thought of Nick Allegretti as a starting center. They think that he is a very good communicator, maybe even a better communicator at the line of scrimmage than Biotish was. And they're confident for whatever it's worth. Weak wide receiver and running back groups. I would certainly say that the wide receiver room is not very strong at this point. Of course, it's pending an addition, which I do think is coming in the form of Brandon Ayuk, and if not Ayuk, perhaps somebody else. The running back room, is it weak? I mean, it's not a strength of the team, but I don't have a problem with their running back room, to be honest with you. I mean, I think Krosky Merritt has the ability to turn into something more than, just, a part-time first down back, not used on third down as much. I do actually like Jeremy McNichols as a third down back, as a pass blocker. I like Rachaad White probably more than you guys do. Not as a game-breaking kind of guy, but as a guy that can absolutely run between the tackles on early downs, pass block, catch the football out of the backfield. And I liked Katron Allen. It might be, as Jay Gruden told us earlier, just a duplicate of Rachaad White. But look, I mean, they did not make major upgrades offensively with the exception of Chigakonkwo. And yes, he is shorter than Ertz, to your point, Skins 28 Forever. But I like Okonkwo. I actually think that he is potentially an ascending player, and it's going to be his first opportunity to be with a real quarterback at the NFL level. And I think the other thing is, I don't think David Blau, from a scheme standpoint, is going to ask Jaden to play Superman. I think he's going to put him into better situations with hopefully a run game that creates a really good marriage between run and pass, and really the result of that being a lot more play action. As I've said many times, going back to the Blau elevation, I think the number one thing that will be very noticeable will be the significant increase in play action pass attempts. And I think that certainly will be helpful. But yeah, they could use another playmaker. They haven't added that big time added playmaker. I'm going to get to, somebody on their roster from last year that could be in a moment, but I'm going to first tell you about Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler today got full medical clearance following, remember, the Achilles injury that he had in that week 2 game against the Packers on a Thursday night. And reports are that Eckler will be in demand now that he has been cleared medically for the upcoming season. He's set to turn 31 years old. There is no doubt that Austin Eckler, healthy on this team in 2024, made this offense a better offense than with anybody else in the backfield. Is it a possibility that he would come back here? Man, the running back room does seem crowded, and I think that in terms of a pass catcher out of the backfield, it's one of the reasons they added Rachaad White. Yeah, I don't think Eckler's coming back here. My guess is that probably is not going to happen. But there is a player that has not signed yet that I do think could make some sense depending on how the next few weeks go. And when I say the next few weeks, probably more like the next few months before training camp. There's a player that hasn't signed with anybody else, is an unrestricted free agent, was on this roster last year, that could ultimately make some sense for this offense. I'll tell you who that is when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. Story on CBS Sports.com says that the best fit for Deebo Samuel, Mike McDaniel's offense in Los Angeles with the Chargers with Justin Herbert. Why wouldn't Deebo Samuel be a good fit back here? I think he would be. Deebo Samuel was pretty good for this team last year. Second most receptions in his career. Played 16 of the 18 games. He had 72 receptions. He had a season in 2021 where he caught 77 balls. 727 yards last year, averaged 10.1 yards per reception, 5 touchdowns on the year. He was excellent last year as a returner as well before he got banged up, and then they moved McCaffrey into that role. If they don't add a Brandon Ayuk at some point and you get to the beginning of training camp and there's no Stephon Diggs or no Juwan Jennings, of the list of the players that have not signed elsewhere that were on the roster a year ago, guys like Noah Brown and Sheldon Day and Chase Edmonds and Austin Eckler, we just talked about him. He's been cleared. Zach Ertz, Eddie Goldman, Von Miller hasn't signed anywhere else. Bobby Wagner, of course, has not signed anywhere else. Deebo Samuel. Why wouldn't you consider Deebo Samuel back? The Spot Track contract value number is $15.4 million for 1 year. No one's going to give him that. That is an inflated number. They have plenty of cap space. I would love to see a Deebo Samuel weapon in this kind of an offense. I mean, the fact that Mike McDaniel might think it's a good fit for his offense, and it was a good fit for Kyle Shanahan's offense, it'd be a good fit for the David Blau offense. I thought he was good for our team last year, and I think that was under duress. The duress of not having your starting quarterback for most of the year and not playing side by side with the likes of Terry McLaurin, or in the backfield, somebody like Austin Eckler. Not having, the number 2, the number 3, and number 4 receivers available at times last year. Of the list of players that are hanging out there right now, he's the most interesting to me. I think we've got a crowded running back room. Look, I'm not saying that Austin Eckler, healthy off the Achilles injury, and he was cleared today, as I mentioned in the last segment, wouldn't be, a guy that could really help. But it's just been too hit and miss with Austin Eckler in his 2 years here. I mean, he had the concussions in year 1 toward the Achilles in week 2 of last season. I think they got to be younger. And I'm a believer in Bill as a potential, good starting running back on first, second down as a runner. And we'll see what happens with Rachaad White. I do think White's probably a bigger contributor than most of you are guessing right now, unless Kaytron Allen just ends up being better or more prepared. But the difference is Kaytron Allen doesn't have the experience as a pass blocker or as a pass catcher like White does. Zach Ertz being brought back, that's not going to happen after they sign Chigakonkwo. Even though this could be an offense that's in 12 and even 13 personnel a lot more than it's been. 1 back, 2 tight ends, 1 back, 3 tight ends. Deebo would be interesting to me. Wagner's not coming back at this point. Preston Smith isn't. I'm just looking at the list of players who were on the roster last year. Jeff Driscoll, I don't know. Maybe. A special teams guy like Antonio Hamilton, maybe. Would provide depth at corner. Eddie Goldman, I don't know. I think Tim Settle essentially is replacing what he may have been for this team. You're not going to go down the Noah Brown path again. Yeah. Why not Deebo if they don't add somebody else? If Ayuk doesn't check out and because of it, no one wants him and, he ends up, I don't know, who the hell knows what would happen if he really doesn't check out physically or mentally in terms of his career. If Diggs is in legal hot water right now, you might not be able to wait or count on that. So I would definitely think about it on Debo, if they don't have any other answers. The Nats won last night. We have not talked about that. I mean, the Mets are terrible right now. They crushed the Mets last night, 14-2. In that game, the Nats generated 15 hits, 2 homers in the game by Meade and House. James Wood in the game was 2 for 5 with 3 RBIs. The Nats are the second highest scoring team in the bigs. Only the Braves have more runs than the Nats in the same number of games, 31 games. This is a stunning development. We're 31 games into the season. They've got another 131 left, and maybe everything comes back to what the expectations were. But it's pretty crazy that the Nats have the second most runs in the major leagues. Their hitting for average has dropped a little bit. Their overall hits have dropped a little bit. Their slugging percentage has dropped a little bit. They were in the top 3. Now they're in the top 5 to 7 on in all of those categories. But 14-2 last night over a Mets team that is in absolute disarray. The Phillies fired their manager. They're in disarray as well. And here are the Nats, 14-17, 3 games under 500, on pace for a lot more wins than their over-under suggested. They get one more with the Mets this afternoon, actually a 1:15 start time against the Mets, and then they're home against the Brewers over the weekend. I saw this story after the draft. I don't know if you guys saw this or not, but Baltimore Ravens owner Steve Bisciotti actually got to make a pick in the draft. He owns the team. I mean, owners making picks, not a foreign conversation for those of us around here, but those were always forced. Steve Bisciotti asked general manager Eric DeCosta for permission. Apparently he's very much into the draft. He really enjoys the draft. And he went to DeCosta a few months back and said, we have 4 fifth-round picks. Can I study up and make one of them? And DeCosta said, sure. And Bisciotti, along with DeCosta's 15-year-old son, who helped him prepare. Apparently, Bisciotti's big draft geek, big into it, did a lot of prep. And sure enough, on the clock at 174 in the 5th round, their 4th of their 5th round picks, they selected Clemson running back Adam Randall. Bisciotti said about the selection, he said, we were sitting there and we were worried that another team would take Randall. He was our guy. He was number 1 on our board. On the owner's board. And then the pick before 174 was another Ravens pick. And he had not yet shared with DeCosta who the pick would be. So he was afraid that DeCosta, his own general manager, might take the player. But he didn't. And Adam Randall, who's a big running back, one of those running backs we talked about before the draft, if they were looking for a big banger, Randall would be that guy. And they selected Randall. Even when they selected him, Bisciotti said, I became visibly stressed because I was second-guessing my decision. He said, this S is hard. When you actually make the pick, it's a bare feeling, closed quote. The grade of the specific pick of Adam Randall ranged from C+ to B overall by the various, post-draft graders. Can you imagine if it never would have happened this way? Snyder never asked for permission. He just, decided when he wanted to make a pick and made the pick. But can you imagine if we read about prior to a draft or after a draft that Dan Snyder was given permission to make one of the picks? The fact that he would have asked for permission would have been a miracle. but it would have been viewed much differently than Steve Bisciotti, who is a really good NFL owner. All right, we're done. Chris Russell's next.